He kept his gaze on the balls in front of him, juggling so he could keep his mind on task rather than floating to the million and one things he needed to get done before they got the paper out in the morning, as well as the countless stories that needed to be done during the week for the online editions.
"I'm sure they're good, but you have room for 10 inches, so cut."
He set one ball down on his desk and caught the other two in one hand. It had taken him years to get that trick down, but he couldn't smile in victory while being the boss. He didn't usually juggle while his reporters were talking to him, but Nancy had come into his office unannounced, and he hadn't bothered to stop what he was doing. When he needed to think about his work and couldn't get in the right mindset, he juggled, and Nancy had interrupted that. Again. But this was his job, so he didn't grumble like he might have otherwise. "But I have 11. She raised her chin, and he held back a sigh. "At least read it and tell me what you think." He nodded.
"Send it over."
In all honesty, the 11 inches were probably better than great, but he didn't have space for that extra inch. They'd make it work if needed, but that wasn't the point. Nancy beamed. "Thank you." She pressed something on her tablet, and his computer beeped, signaling an email. "I'll be out there working on my next story." She gave him a nod before leaving him alone in his office. Thankfully, she shut the door behind her so he could get his thoughts in order. He had 2 large pieces he was currently working on that would take a couple of days to get done, plus an upcoming editorial that he'd been looking forward to for the past few months. He needed to get his interviews scheduled, look over the next set of stories coming in, and do a few more admin things before he headed out for the day. But he was getting things done, even if he was still exhausted from not sleeping well enough. He could blame his imaginary blonde all he wanted, but he knew it wasn't only her. Not this time. He was the one dreaming of her, after all. He needed to get her out of his head and away from his dreams. He'd met her once at his brother's bar, had far too much whiskey, and had taken her home where he'd proceeded to have the best sex of his life. She'd been gone the next morning with just a note saying, "Thank you." That was it. No number, no promises. He looked down at the time on his computer and shook his head. He wasn't getting work done in his office today, so he'd just take his work to his brother's place and get the buzz of tourists and the town into his system. If anyone from the office needed him, they knew how to get a hold of him and where to find him. Most of them worked outside the office a couple of times a week, since sitting in one place for too long wasn't always conducive to writing. He let the others know where he was going, packed up his laptop, tablet, and the other things he needed to get his work done, and headed down the street to the Old Whiskey Bar and Restaurant with the Old Whiskey Inn attached to the top levels. He didn't know how his brother handled all of that on his own. Well, he did, since Kenzie managed the inn, and Dare had a whole staff for the restaurant side, but in the end, Dare did most of the work, especially after their parents retired. More often than not, Fox came in and helped out behind the bar on the weekends, since that's what family did, but Dare could have done it without him. His former cop brother was that capable and more. And now that he had Kenzie in his life, Fox had a feeling Dare would get even better at managing all aspects of his life. Hell, he already handled being a father and working the hours he did. And their other brother, Locke, did the same with his daughter, Misty. And Locke didn't even have the girl's mother in the picture like Dare did with Nate's mom. Their sister, Tabby, was a newlywed out in Denver and managed a whole company as well as her husband Alex's photography career, since she was just that damn good at scheduling. Somehow Fox felt like the slacker of the bunch, without kids and with only one job, but he worked really long hours. Maybe Fox needed a new hobby or something to make sure he kept up with his siblings. Then he remembered he was already taking night classes for such a thing and owned the Whiskey Chronicles. He was doing just fine, and he needed to stop forgetting that. Fox ran a hand over his face, thinking it might not be too early for a drink. Of course, the thought of the last time he'd had a glass of whiskey entered his mind, and he quickly shut it away.